Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Tracker Season 1, Episode 11. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. This is an episode that Coulter's had to balance the most between dealing with family stuff and a case. I'm sure that's going to be probably even more prevalent and prominent in maybe episodes 12 and 13, or maybe just 13. Either way, I thought it was interesting because he shows up in Wyoming because a kid, Blake, went missing, but it's college, and some of these kids just disappear for a little while just because of stress and everything. Because Teddy and Vilma are almost like, you still went all the way to Wyoming, who knew like whether it was going to be? And it's like, why did he go all the way here? He was kind of like, it seemed they were making it seem like he was already in that direction, or was a lot more willing to take this case because he was already heading that direction. And we find out later on why. It's because his sister teaches at that same school that just happens. So it's just that he was already on, he had a reason to come by, and I think this case gave him an extra reason, an extra excuse to force himself to go. Because if any other situation, he probably wouldn't have gone, but the case gave him the perfect excuse, interesting enough. Which I also love that his sister is played by Melissa Roxenberg, and I was like, oh, that's so dope. The thing I best know her for is playing Michaela in the show Manifest. So I was like, oh, that's so sick. Because at first when he was sitting down like watching, because I thought she'd be like a professor connected to this case, and he was smiling to you, and he walked up to her like he knows her, and I was like, oh my god, that's your sister. Which immediately my brain was like, oh, that's so cool. Because I was asking, like, we haven't really gotten to see a lot of the family. The last time we saw their mom was like episode 2. So I was like, oh man. And then I was like, oh man, if she's playing like the older version of his sister, I'm like, who's going to play the older version of his brother? And I had to stop because obviously the season's been done for a couple months now, but I do know Jensen Ackles pops up in the show. I don't know if it's going to be next episode or just in the season finale, but I know he pops up, and I was like, it's him, isn't it? He plays the adult version of Russell, doesn't he? So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, it's like he's also bringing up the file. I guess that's why the past episodes he's been talking a little bit more about the family stuff. It's because I guess he looked through that file. He got it back, episode 2 of the show, when he was dealing with that cult and everything. But he looked at it and he tossed it aside, and we hadn't really seen him circle back to that. Maybe he's been taking little peeks into it every once in a while, but maybe as the seasons progress, he's gotten more and more curious. But because like the family stuff has come up in conversations more and more throughout the cases, so it really hits a fever pitch here, obviously, because he's got a lot of questions, because he's asking his sister, like, right, here's some stuff about dad. It's like, yeah, here's some, yeah, this, and this. But then we find out, wait, he worked for the government for like 7 years. It's like, yeah, but why didn't mom ever mention that? And Dory's coming from the perspective of it's in the past. What happened, happened. It actually turns out, it seems like she actually has a relationship with her brother Russell now. Whether it's just because you think he had something to do with your dad's death, like for whatever reason, him and Russell have not been on good terms. And obviously, like, it hasn't come up for a while, but early parts of the season, especially like the first episode, might have been second or so, but I think it was just the first episode, he was ignoring Russell's call. And apparently, like, he's been ignoring Dory's as well. And it's family's such a complicated thing for him, and I think that also, once again, his family circumstances kind of play in that trauma, and just everything associated with his family is also how he moves about the world, where he has associations, but he never sticks around in one place. It's easier just to move around, not trying to set up roots anywhere, and just, it's freeing, but it's also avoidance. He's just trying to avoid everything, because it's just like, you never like stick around too long to have to kind of deal with maybe your emotions like you should. I think that's an element to it. But she's kind of moved on, and she wants her brother to do the same. And she's like, all right, let's have dinner. And he's kind of what he normally does. He makes excuses like, I don't know. And she's like, right, you're going to do this. Like, I don't know when the next time you're going to swing by Wyoming, so I have no idea when the next time I'm going to see you, so you're going to do this. Sadly, he misses their dinner plans because he gets so wrapped up in the case. Because initially it's like, hey, maybe there's nothing to this. Maybe like the Blake kid really was stressed out and stuff like that. Especially because the mom ended up saying later on her brother ended up being diagnosed with schizophrenia, and she's worried because it was like around the same time, like Blake's around the same age as when her brother was diagnosed and like first showed symptoms. So, or signs, I guess, I don't know, symptoms would be the right word in that case. I think signs would probably be the more appropriate word in that, whatever the case may be. And she was worried that maybe he had like a schizophrenic like break. So she's kind of worried about that, but Coulter plans on looking into it. So he ends up going to the lab, which immediately when we got introduced to Professor Hewitt, I'm not sure. I believe that's the same actor from Motherland Fort Salem. It is the same actor. His name is Bob Frazier. He was Albert Hirsch in Motherland Fort Salem. And so I was like, the moment I saw him, I was like, isn't that same twisted scientist guy? And lo and behold, he ends up being a bad guy. I'm not gonna cut him any slack or bail because it's kind of effed up what he does in this episode, but it's like he's not as villainous as he is in Motherland Fort Salem, but he's still a douchebag in this. But the moment he popped up, I'm like, is he going to be the bad guy? Especially because he was the first one to kind of like be like, well, Blake, I actually had to let him go because he was fudging the numbers, and after the whole Elizabeth Holmes of it all, like, we can't like have anything we do be jeopardized, so everything has to be above board. He was fudging some numbers, yada yada yada. But his friend Jada, who kind of didn't believe, like, oh, this whole element of, oh, he just kind of bailed out, because she saw him at the party, which was the opening. That's sad. He thought he saw someone, which at that moment, like, putting that together, his sudden disappearance, him thinking he saw someone at the party, I was like, oh, because he saw the blonde hair, I was like, oh, he's getting catfished, which he he definitely was. And getting punched and then like knocked into a pool, I was like, that's super not cool. Like, the guy made a mistake. He's like, yo, I'm sorry. I thought, for one, you should have been more careful. You should have been like, hey, is that you? And tapped on her on the shoulder or something, not grabbing her. That was, you messed it. But it's also like, that was an overreaction. So, but yeah, we find out from Jada, it's like, yeah, he's a socially awkward person, but he was putting himself out there more and more because Bobby finds out, like, oh, he has a new lady in his life. Find out they were sending nudes to each other. The place they were supposed to meet up at kind of has some BDSM stuff, and it's a woman. Her real name is Irina, not Irina, just Irene. But it turns out the whole thing was a scam because they handle a lot of trolling and just like they handle some stuff on the dark web. I was like, wow. She tries to see, like, we didn't really get into it, but it does seem like her husband's a piece of work, Chuck. He's the one that handles a lot of stuff, and she just kind of goes along with it. So it's not as Bonnie and Clyde, as more like if Clyde just dragged Bonnie along type of situation. It's like you're still culpable because you still went along with it. You catfished this kid. You knew he was in some danger, and you didn't say anything. Like, if you really want to make up for it, you help out. Because yeah, like, she saw, like, basically Blake followed her to like the store she works at and was like, yo, like, we need to get out of here. He became obsessed with her because he was super in love. That was the whole point. But like, because the client they work for, the moment they're like the client, I was like, it's got to be Hewitt, the teacher, the professor from the lab. It's like I was like, there's got to be something Blake has. Like, he found out some like malfeasance. He found out some BS that like, oh, this guy's up to something, and that's what this is all about. And turns out that's exactly the case. But yeah, like, Chuck, like, bashing his head on the counter and then just like, oh, let's drag the kid out of here. It's like, never took him to a hospital. Chuck hasn't been back in 2 days. Like, you didn't say anything because, well, one, you didn't want to suffer Chuck's wrath. It definitely seems like kind of a abusive relationship, but it's still the thing of you went along with it, so you're still just as copacetic. So, but yeah, man, Chuck is a real piece of work. So, using Irene, they were able to eventually catch, Dex, he's in the middle of all of this because he knew what the professor was up to. He knew the professor was fudging numbers and stuff, but it's like, the work is too important. It's like, this would have just given us some buffer time until we could get our results to where they're actually supposed to be, the results that the professor was presenting to the investors and stuff. So it's a complicated situation of, like, once again, they went about it the worst way, and Dex is kind of an idiot for going along with it. I mean, suggesting someone to try and, who knows? He probably didn't know the intricacies of how far this was going to go. Granted, things spiraled out the moment, like, Blake fell for Irene, so, and Chuck being kind of a not good dude. Like, the Professor Hewitt at least is like, well, we could just get the evidence and let the kid go. Chuck is like, no, the kid's seeing our faces. He knows too much. We have to kill him. We can't trust him not to go to the police. So, yeah, once again, Chuck's like the worst person in this, but Irene and Hewitt Hewitt's just as bad. He actually does kill someone. He killed Chuck. I kind of thought he was going to have a moment of redemption of, like, before Chuck tried to kill Blake that he would like defend him and maybe get shot. Maybe he dies in the process, but or at least gets wounded. Gets wounded at the end of the episode regardless, but I thought that's the direction that was going to go, but it didn't. And so it's like, yeah, he ends up killing Chuck and then like has Blake and he's just like probably trying to force Blake's hand because it's like, I'll let you go if you give me the evidence. But it's like, you're going to, that's the thing. I guess because he knew he couldn't trust Chuck, because maybe he overheard like Blake being like, you can't trust Mr. DeWitt, Professor DeWitt. He's like, oh, but like, I said DeWitt. I don't know why I'm saying DeWitt. Hewitt, sorry. He's like, you can't trust him. It's like, well, I don't trust anyone, kid. So maybe that's where it came into play. It's like, oh, this guy is willing to kill this kid. Who's to say he won't kill me just to cover up the fact that he killed this kid? You know, because I'm a witness to it. So it's a self-preservation type of thing, maybe. I don't know. Like I said, at least to some degree, he was willing to let just let Blake go, but you know, desperation at the very end there. But yeah, I love Coulter trying to give him an out, being like, yo, you have a gun on me, I will shoot you first if you like try this. And he's like using the mirror to know exactly where it is. It's like, all right, gave him a chance to let Blake go and shot him. And it's like, well, he's luckily alive, so he gets to pay for his crimes. He goes down for killing Chuck and the attempted murder of Blake. Who knows what Irene's going to suffer in the long run, because you are still a willing participant in this. Probably won't suffer as big of a ramification as Chuck would have, or Professor Hewitt does. But, you know, it is interesting to find out that the person he left the flash drive with all the evidence on was Jada. Like, she had no idea she had it, though. But he's like, yeah, that's the only person I trust. I guess he knew he couldn't really trust Dex either. But it's like, they are friends. Him and Dex weren't. So I guess that's what it is. But it's like, even that, in the end, he does ask, like, what's going to happen to Dex? It's like, well, he had his part to play, but he will serve some jail time, but he'll most likely get out with, like, you know, maybe like some probation and good behavior. He's young enough to turn his life around, you know. He was mixed up in this, but he wasn't as involved in the dark side of things, but he still, you know, hooked him up with Connect from the dark web. So, like I said, him and Irene are probably in similar boats. I think Irene will probably have harsher sentence on her being an adult and everything. They're both adults, so I don't know. So that ends up being the end result. It all works out in the end. But like I said, how this balances with the family side of things, because he finally has dinner with his sister at the end of the episode. Even though he was trying to avoid it, she was upset with him and he missed dinner, because it's just like, at first she's thinking like, oh, who's this random woman you're getting with? Because I think she probably hasn't, because like I think she said the last time they saw each other was like a year ago, was the last time they were around each other. So, and he ignores her phone calls, but she probably knows like how like her brother has deep-seated commitment issues, and not just relationship-wise in general, whether it's of a significant other variety or a family variety, or as a brother. But I thought it was kind of a neat conversation that they had at the end, where it's like, oh, you're going to leave afterwards, and it's like, she's like, I think you resent me. He's like, what are you talking about? It's like, when our uncle and aunt offered us an opportunity to leave, she's like, I hopped in the car the first, and you decided to stay. He was like, I had to, because mom had no one. Her husband just died, and she would have literally had no one. But his sister doesn't feel as guilty, because she's like, mom basically has been force feeding you a lie. Like, maybe some of it's true, maybe it's all horseshit, who knows? But the fact is, mom has done so much, which we as the audience know, his mom is hiding stuff from him and not telling him the truth, but because he feels like their mom is blindsided by a lot of stuff related to their dad. But Dory's from the perspective of, yeah, dad might have been weird and wild and dragged us along with all of that stuff, but mom was right beside him. Like, it seemed like she had some resistance to it, but she still went along with a lot of that. So Dory kind of, I think, has a lot, like, she doesn't have the affection. I think it's still the thing of, our mom is our mom and our dad is our dad, and I won't change that, but I'm like, I'm not going to let them control and dictate so much of my life, where it just feels like Coulter has been hamstrung so much by like his guilt, and you know, there's a puzzle in front of him he's trying to figure out about his family situation, and he seems to feel like he's the only one amongst his siblings who care. Russell probably does too, but who knows? Dory's really just trying to put it all behind her, and that's what this was all about. She's trying to get Coulter to do the same. But it's just kind of a thing of, maybe on some level Coulter did feel like he kind of got abandoned because he had to take the brunt of that, which he chose that, but it's like he never outwardly admitted it, but maybe on some level he did resent her, and she kind of recognizes that. And it's such a shame. It's just like, especially because it's like, but what she said does resonate with him, of like just kind of letting it go. Like, is it even worth it? Like, what happened happened. Nothing will kind of really change that. And it's like, you've let mom, like, she can't let go of the past, and she's been kind of him. Even though, like, she makes it seem like, at least when we got introduced to her in like episode 2, I believe, that she was trying to tell him just to kind of let stuff go, but she's still hiding stuff from him because maybe she is so obsessed with the past. She's trying to figure things out on her own and inadvertently dragging. Maybe she's come to realize how much she's been putting on Coulter, and she doesn't want him involved in this. Maybe she has some secrets of her own she's trying to cover up. I don't know. But the conversation with Dory did, like, the look on Coulter's face at the very end, that it did mean something to him. You know, because he was quick to, you know, change the subject when, you know, after a while into the conversation, because it's like, right, let's end up like, hey, you know, but it's like Coulter kind of, like I said, kind of runs away from a lot of stuff. I think this is probably the first time in a long time someone's kind of said something to him that kind of made him stop, at least just for a little bit, and to kind of think things through. Of like, so I wonder, what does this mean? Will he eventually end up confronting his mom, or is he going to try and take Dory's advice? I mean, considering like how much this has kind of consumed him and been a part of him for so long, it, you know, he even says like, oh, there's complicated situations. He's probably more so referencing their mom and stuff, that things are not so simple, it's complicated, but it's like, it's been so intrinsic and part of him for so long, he probably can't fully let it go. It's probably what that comes down to. So anyway, some very interesting developments. I'm really curious to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, penultimate episode of the season. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.